That's all right. I'm going to take this off. Okay, good morning, everybody. Thank you so much for coming. I was kind of wondering how many people would actually be here at a 9 o'clock panel, and I'm pleasantly surprised to see how many there are. So I'm a teacher, so I'm used to walking around and talking. It's kind of hard for me to sit, but I'll just do this for a second, and then I'll sit down. So my name is Marcel Lee, and the first thing I want to do is to thank Mark and BSides for having us here. I'm with the Women's Society of CyberJutsu, and we basically are sort of a female-centric training nonprofit group for women and girls. So we do all things cybersecurity. We're very techy, and it's focused on getting more women involved in the industry. So I have an amazing panel. I'm going to just say their names and then let them introduce themselves. But I have Matt Duran from Tenable, Lisa Foreman from Women's Society of CyberJutsu, our esteemed founder, Mark Covington, who is with Severo Security Group, and Amelie, federal government, and various other things. And then Mark, of course, who is, I'm just going to say BSides, and you can say whatever else you'd like to say. So it's a panel. We're going to talk about some different things, but basically can talk a little bit about just sort of the purpose of this, why we're here, what we're trying to do, right? And what some of the problems are with diversity in tech, and what we see are some possible solutions as well. So it's epic fail and making progress, because we feel like there's a lot of good things going on, and we just want to talk about that a little bit more. So without further ado, let me have the panelists say a little bit about themselves and why they're here. And you can, I don't know if you want to hold it.
Sure, pick up. Morning, everybody. Again, my name is Matt Duran. I work at Tenable Network Security. I am the recruiter there. I handle a lot of the R&D stuff, developers, some various security positions. But I have about 13 years of recruiting experience, mostly in the technology, a little bit of college recruiting. I am hopefully going to bring a different perspective to the group here. This is a workforce issue. I've seen a lot of things with regard to laws and different tactics and compliance issues that hopefully will shed a different light on this and hopefully bring up some solutions.
Yeah. Thanks. Lisa?
Good morning, everybody. My name is Lisa Foreman-Gietz, founder, excuse me, founder and CEO of the Women's Society of CyberJutsu. As Marcel said, we provide resources to women to advance in cyber. We're a nonprofit pending status right now. It was just timely that I started the organization when I did, because there was another group out there that I wanted to join. So in the 2 years that we've been doing this, I've seen a lot of things that I think can bring perspective to our discussion today. So I'm glad to be part of this panel. Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Mark Covington, and I'm with the Severo Security Group. I'm happy to be here today. I work in the cybersecurity industry, and I'm also a teacher of 2 software applications at a school called Fortis Institute. It's up in Baltimore. Hopefully I can bring my perspective to what's going on today. Certainly there are a lot of minorities, African Americans who are in the work of the field, and hopefully I can shed some light on perspective in that.
Hello, my name is Amelie Cran. I currently work for the federal government. I can't necessarily say where, but did the full stack of security stuff, so I'm here kind of as an information security professional, but also one of the roles I've recently stepped into is president of our agency's LGBT organization. And from that, I've been involved with developing workforce policy and looking at that across the federal government and how that's impacted hiring and benefits. And just being a tech person, I've had to bring in my concerns over hiring well-qualified LGBT, QA, type of people in the federal government, and how we can actually lead in the public sector as well as where the private sector is going.
my name is Mark Holtz Robinson. I'm the co-founder of Security BSides DC, as you all already know. The last name hyphenation now is because I was legally wed to my interracially black husband in Vermont last week. I don't ever recommend pulling off a wedding and a BSides at the same time. And so while I've never personally really experienced any issues as a minority in this community, I have, obviously perspective on quality issues in general, especially what it took for us from my marriage point of view, in the fact of here in the Commonwealth of Virginia, that was not actually legal until a court decision just 2 weeks ago. So I think there's a lot of fun stuff we need to talk about.
All right, super. So thank you, everybody, for the intros. Normally, I do a lot of talks about women in tech, and I have a lot of... oh, sorry. Here you go. Is that better? Here you go. Normally, I have a big PowerPoint with a lot of statistics and whatnot, but we're not doing that today because it's just a panel. It's a little more informal. But statistics, so do I need to say statistics, or can we just look around the room and kind of make our own observation about statistics? Yeah, so, I mean, basically, there's a lot of different studies, and it depends on who you look at, but the stats are really low. Like women in tech, maybe around 20%. I don't know the stats for every other group that we have here, but it's low. And the whole point is, how do we get more diversity? Diversity is critical, right? If you have a team, if you don't have diversity, then it really hampers your ability to be creative and nimble and responsive to the market. So what I'd like to ask my panelists, and you can all just chime in if you want to, is how do you see the team environment with diversity, without diversity? Does it make a difference? I think it does, obviously, but okay, go ahead, Mark.
So I think for me, the thing is that, I guess the first fundamental question is yeah, do we need diversity? Is this tech community okay the way it is or not? And I say no, and the reason why I say no is because it comes to the larger issue, I think, of what we all always call the echo chamber. We're all always at these conferences, BSides and the Black Hat and DEF CON and everything, and it's the same people talking about the same things, and yet we never seem to really make a whole lot of progress in actually improving information security. We still always have the buffer overflows and the other stupid stuff that happens time and time again, even though some of us have been doing this for over 20 years. And I see the same things that happen today with like Heartbleed and everything else, and even like shell shock. They're all things that we were doing the same thing 20 years ago. If we don't fundamentally change the diversity of this group to get different viewpoints and different perspectives, I don't think we're going to fix some of the larger issues that need to be solved. If it's the same people with the same viewpoint over and over and over again, it's much more difficult to make progress, and that's my view.
Thank you, Mark. Does anybody else want to comment? Lisa?
So, I think the awareness is good. Awareness obviously makes people aware, right, that there's an issue if you didn't think it was one. So something like this is great, you know what I mean? And I think every group, not just our industry, every different type of group has, an issue, but specifically with tech, obviously, women, only represent, cyber 12% women. So, and ironically, we found that there's a lot of diversity among women, but just not in the general population of folks in cyber. So I think everyone's doing their part. It's going to take time, but if everyone's doing their part, it's like any major societal issue, it will change in the masses for the better.
Yeah.
So I think we're doing good. It's it's a big issue that not everyone thinks is an issue, but it isn't realize it is. So, kudos for this.
Yeah.
One thing to add. I talk about this a lot with my recruiting community. There's a lot of talk about it. I just don't think there's a lot of accountability added into it. And this is across the board, all departments, all industries. People want to be more inclusive of folks, but until numbers are assigned to it, and you never want to do that because then you start going quotas, and quotas are horrible when it comes to hiring people. It makes for more active discrimination than anything else. But until there's some sort of level of accountability at the senior level, it's just not going to happen.
Thanks, Matt. So whenever we talk about this, it makes me think of continuous monitoring, right? So continuous monitoring is a checkbox that people have to do in their organizations. Is anybody actually looking at that data or whatever? Maybe, maybe not. So I feel like it's a kind of a good analogy for the diversity in tech thing. So like Matt was saying, you can have a quota or whatever, check a box, but are you really making a relevant difference? So one of the things that I wanted to ask the panel was, so why is it like this? I go to a lot of different conferences, and this certainly is a hot topic these days, but why is there such a lack of diversity in this industry? I have some ideas about that, but I'd like to also hear what the panel has to think. Amelie?
Yeah, so if you're a federal employee, there's a federal viewpoint survey that gets sent out, and they ask a lot of demographic information, and granted, it's all voluntary, but just recently they've requested information on gender identity and sexual orientation. So the federal government right now is getting, how many years the federal government's been in a position to try to examine diversity, and they're just now doing it. The numbers have been enlightening, but it's one of these things of self-identification. So, they're not necessarily breaking down in job roles, but one anecdotally, I was in a rotation at the White House this summer, and I was hearing stories about folks not being able to get in the door in certain cases where their documentation didn't match their presentation. So you're missing out on getting good people in front of the folks who can actually make good decisions. So they're worried about the Secret Service not letting them in to give a presentation to the president or his tech council because of the institutional biases against that. So we need to kind of think about removing some of those roadblocks or the stigma along with that as well, and just looking at who we're hiring and how they're being utilized within our workforce is one step.
Thanks. Anybody else? Matt?
I'd like to say that having one of my degrees is I received an MBA from the University of Maryland, and also worked in the banking industry. I worked for SunTrust as a business manager for 20 years. And in coming into the cybersecurity business, one of the things that I see is that you look at the way corporations are formed. They're formed at the ground level. A lot of the inventors, a lot of the people who put the companies together at the ground level tend not to be minorities. And when they bring on their staff, when they put together the presidents and vice presidents and different people in the organization, a lot of times minorities are not included in that. And as the company begins to grow, as it begins to expand, minorities tend to come in, but in trickles and droves. And so, it's almost like, I want to say a natural flow of things. You bring your friends and the people who help you in your startup phase, and bring them in on the bottom floor. And another thing that happens is that as your business begins to grow and as you begin to want to attract corporate capital, they tell you in investment banking, you need to go out and, this is just a term they use, they say you need to go out and hire the gray-head guys. These are guys who look business-like and very conservative. You hire them to come on board to do your presentations for you and to give your company a certain kind of look, a certain kind of feel. So a lot of times that tends to be a minority perspective as well. But I believe things are changing. As especially with cybersecurity, because cybersecurity people are kind of geeky and kind of weird, and they go in and do presentations, and they have on the wrong color socks, and mismatch everything, and business people don't know what to think of them. But in other industries, they kind of push the more conservative look.
Thanks.
So-
Well, I'm sorry, go ahead, Mark.
So in asking the question, why are we here in terms of why we lack the diversity that we see in the larger populace, I think part of that comes down to, even though, and I find this fascinating actually in a way, that we do have this perception of a lot of people in technology tend to actually be, we at least hear things that there's a tendency towards the misogynistic geek who's actually spending most of their time when they're not coding looking for porn. And there's an immaturity level to the geek or the tech as a stereotype, of course. It's a construct. But I think that it's just also within that community, even though it's a community where people should have a greater understanding of being tolerant to the differences of others, because a lot of people, that are in tech, that are the geeks, are perceived as the, the geeky nerd and who gets put down in high school at a high school job, right? That even though you'd think that would make them more open, it doesn't necessarily be the case that you end up forming a clique of the like-minded people that is an even stronger barrier than it should be. I think in terms of trying to put a different kind of analogy on what I'm trying to say, is in the LGBTQ community, the lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender community, even gays have issues with lesbians, and they don't want lesbians in the group, and gays and lesbians don't want transgender people in the group. And a lot of gays, lesbians, and transgender people think there's no such thing as a bisexual person. So we tend to form these boxes and these barriers and these compartments that we like to be in, partly because it's safe. It's something that, I've got like people around me. And I think that's true in a larger perspective, not just in IT. And I think that's one of our biggest challenges now in terms of, as we look to overcome that, is how did those other groups do it? And I think it's in part because they kept having discussions. And people have finally put their foot down and said, you know what, no, enough is enough. We need to change this. And now it's our turn.
Yes, thank you. Any other comments? I have a few comments, of course. So both Marks actually touched on that whole, we tend to go with people that we like and are familiar to us, and usually it's not going to be a diverse thing. You associate with people that are similar to you. And the whole thing about, labels, labeling people is something that we do in America. Not so much in other countries. It's kind of interesting here, but it's really hard to be just a person, right? You're always identified as a male, a female, black, white, gay, not gay. There's always a label involved. So how do we make it not be such such a black and white kind of thing? And I don't mean black and white racially, but yeah, so how do we make it different? How do we not use labels? And that's not just in this industry, it's everywhere, of course. Any thoughts on that?
I'll add just kind of one thing to this whole hangs with thing. Does anybody know what the number one source of hire is for most companies out there? Exactly. So if we're all hanging out with the same people, and all the groups are the same people, we're just referring the same kinds of people and creating that internal, the whole, everybody looks the same, everybody acts the same. And that's what slows down progress sometimes. So not that it's, but everybody's trying to push for more referrals. Everybody knows good people. Everybody knows good people. Well, we all know kind of the same people, and that doesn't really help with this whole diversity issue, unless people start to actively bring others that are different to organizations and groups just like this. We're only going to know the same people that we've always known, and I don't think that would be the solution for the situation.
I was going to say that, it's, to build on what you're saying, is if you're in a role where you can actually make a difference, it's to take a chance. When I was in a role where I was hiring people, instead of picking somebody who was fitting the HR description of the position description, I was like, no, I want somebody with these skills, is general, like knows how to work on a data center, will teach the rest. But the same thing goes for diversity too, is that you're going to get, if you're working through a large HR system, sometimes, especially in the federal government, it's how well they've rewritten their resume to what the, kind of the federal system is. And you're not going to find that diamond in the rough unless you're out actively kind of, taking a chance on somebody. So if you come to a security conference here, but you could be going somewhere else, run into some conversation at a bar and you find this person, has some skills or something like that, and they've given you some sob story. Those are the types of referrals, not just the ones that you're going to see in this, this smaller community here. And I know, just within the LGBT community, and I'll specifically out myself, in the trans community, is that, there's a lot of institutional bias against folks who have different gender identities. So I'm hearing stories from folks there that, they can't find a job because of their gender identity, and it's a matter of getting those people talking to the right folks as well. So it's helping each other within the community, but also taking a chance to say, hey, get these two people, talking to one another, and hopefully find a connection.
Anybody else on that?
So, oh yeah.
So I don't know how this was work, but I think labels, like everybody labels themselves, and labels are part of the diversity thing. I don't have a problem labeling myself black, and I think that diversity is having a lot of people with labels. You can't have it both ways. You know what I'm saying? You can't say, hey, we want to be diverse, and there's no labels. I think you have to have kind of labels are okay.
Yeah.
I don't have a problem with it.
No, that's cool. And I think we will have some time for questions and comments at the end. I mean, certainly we'd like to have that. But so labels, are they good? Are they bad? I don't know. It's just, but it is certainly a thing in our world.
It doesn't have to be a negative thing. I mean, I'm black. I identify myself as black. People see me, I'm black. But I got skills though. That's what matters.
Yeah. So if that's how people make decisions, that'd be great. But it's not. Right?
I think so. I think
Question is, can you do the job that you apply for? That's a big
Yeah.
question right there.
That's it. I'm black.
Yeah, I'm kind of agreeing with him to some extent. Labels, a label, whatever. What do we do with that though? We tend to go with similar people, right?
Yeah.
Regardless, maybe it's a race thing, it's a gender, whatever. Now we have to consciously cross over, if you will. So now we're at the people part of it. Am I going to take a chance on talking to this person because they are this race or they're that sexual orientation, whatever? You know what I mean? Labels, I think, are, label. I don't know how you can get away from labeling, or maybe, I don't know what we're saying with labeling. I don't think it's a bad thing, but you're categorizing yourself in some fashion. I think that's a human thing to do, is what we do. But what do you do with that?
Right. And so coming back around to the point I was originally trying to make, is it's not about the labels themselves, but what happens when we use them. And think back to the keynote yesterday too, and the point Jericho was trying to make when he was talking about women in IT, and his point that, I mean, in an ideal world, we would actually get to that point where we are just all human beings, and we have a job to do. And we're not doing it well enough. We need to be better at it. And we need good people to do that. And that's the only thing that should matter. Do we have the good people that know what the hell they're doing? I don't care as far as labels go, if you're a CISSP or a CISA and so on and so forth, and you have this and that certification. I could care less. In my experience, that's total garbage.
Those are bad labels.
Yes, there are labels and there are bad labels. So, I mean, I have certifications too, but I know many people who don't, who have mad skills, who are awesome, and I know many people who do, who I wouldn't trust to, you know, even turn a computer on, much less do anything with it. So, labels have a role, but I think the challenge is when we have a community where the perception, at least, of the stereotype is, again, like, a lot of women who are in IT get out of IT and do other things because we see stuff at conferences that take place in the way that people end up objectifying other people and reducing them to stereotypes of one form or another, and in using that as a, you're a them, not an us. You don't belong here. And that's where it becomes a dangerous thing. It's a tool like any other. It can be very useful, but labels can also be very detrimental, like any other tool.
Thanks, Mark. Well, I think they're easily applied and quickly applied, and not necessarily correctly. So, just to touch on what you mentioned about the conferences, it's jumping ahead a little bit, but that's part of it, and Amelie said this too. It's like, if you are coming into this industry and you're not the regular demographic, it's kind of hard, right? You have to sort of be a bit of a trailblazer. You have to be brave. It's not easy to be the only female in a room full of guys at a con or in a competition or whatever. Not everybody is able to do that. And I think that one of the things we need to look at is how do we change that? How do we make the environment more friendly to diversity? I did a talk the other day, and I put a picture of Hacker Jeopardy, DEF CON, in my presentation, and it's a bunch of guys on the panel answering the questions, and like a stripper girl doing her thing, and like, to me, that's the epic fail. That's like a horrible thing to do at a conference, I think, because it just makes it very unwelcoming and unfriendly to anybody who is basically not, just a regular guy. What are some thoughts that you all have on sort of those environmental things and how they affect diversity and how we can change those?
I was just going to say, there's that old meme out there, nobody knows your dog on the internet. And that's the case, is if you're demonstrating your talents, no one knows that it's a man or a woman at the other end of the pen test. The idea is, what Mark said, it's about talent, it's about jobs, how you do your job. And unfortunately, it's, having those internal biases. When somebody walks into a room and within a couple seconds, you're automatically judging them based on how they present themselves, if they're in shorts and a t-shirt, if they have long hair, they're bearded, unbearded, male, female, whatever. And I think that's one of the more difficult things to get over is just human nature. How we make that better is it's a societal change. And you look at generationally talking about the gray hairs, they're working their way out. That's, those are the things that need to roll through society. So you have millennials coming up here that don't see an issue with sexual orientation, gender identity, race, where you're from, whatever. And some of it's going to take some time, but I'm not quite sure if we have, we can actually wait that long to progress. So.
I vote for public shaming. What I mean by that is, the thing, I find it interesting that it irritates me personally and it offends me when I see those pictures of the booth babes at Black Hat or DEF CON, and we all say, oh my God, that those don't work, they don't actually sell anything, and yet you see lots of people walking around those booths each time. And it offends me, also in part because, I'm a gay man, and that's immediately exclusive to me, that you're using, the perception of a stereotype of what a guy's gonna like to sell a product because you think that they're all the straight geek who's all about boobies, and that's offensive. It's offensive to me, it's offensive to the women I know in the community, it's offensive to the idea that any kind of product that, yeah, sex sells. I think that's bullshit. I call bullshit on that. I think that we all need to tell those vendors, you suck. You suck for doing that. Don't do it again. Don't show up here next year with those people. Tell us why your stuff is good and how it's going to be a tool that's going to help me solve an IT challenge. That's what I want to know. And we all need to put our foot down on that and say enough's enough. And when we all do that, and enough people do it, those vendors will maybe finally get back by the glue by four and understand what the hell they're doing wrong.
I think public shaming is a very thin line though, because you risk the backlash of alienating your group that you're advocating for. And I see it all the time where I totally agree that it should be called out, like conference organizers call it out. All right.
We're going to do questions after this?
Yeah, we'll do questions.
But it's a dangerous thing, the public shaming thing. And I think it undermines a lot of organizations that are trying to do good work. I see it all the time, especially with the women are having a big problem now with that. They're calling stuff out, they should call it out, but then there's a huge backlash and it's ugly. And when the hate steps in, like that's the problem, where people are just hating on each other. And that's never going to be productive.
So I had this idea that we would go to DEF CON specifically and have a booth with Chippendales, but I decided not to go that route because for that very reason. We have a point to make, but I think that's not the way we want to do it, right? Specifically, when I was going back to conferences in general, I mean, word for word is what I was going to say, what Holly said. It's a societal thing, it's going to take time, we're getting there, the word is part of it, but like I would never go to a con by myself.
So let me just clarify it. So when I say that was my public shaming was just I didn't mean it to be a statement that we need to be militant and hateful ourselves. But what we all need to do is each and every one of you here in this room need to pass it on to your people in this community to say that every time you're at a conference, find the person, the marketing person who is responsible for that booth and tell them, hey, that's not cool. That's the issue that I want people to think of when I say public shaming, is just having a stand and saying something about it. And saying enough's enough. Stop that crap, it's stupid.
I think if you come at it from a different angle, it might be more successful. If they're at a booth and they can't answer technical questions,
Right.
why did you bring that person to this conference if they can't answer my technical questions about your product? I probably am not going to buy it now because I don't think that you're competent enough to bring technical people to this, to what you represent. Public shaming, get your point across, everybody's happy.
The other thing is too, sorry, but besides the public shaming, it's the actual rewarding of those who do stick their neck out, that do the right thing. You know, they may not be 100% the most optimal tool or solution, or they may not be perfect, but if you're rewarding that they're making steps in the right direction in some form or another, or at least, you know, mentioning like, hey, you know, if you're in a position to say, yeah, they're doing a good job at this, you know, the word gets out. So, and you know, within the industry, it's all about money. So, you know, if folks are following that, then everyone else, like sheep, are going to follow it.
Yeah, and if even their salespeople understand their product, then I'm going to anticipate better support out of them after I buy it.
Exactly.
So,
Jeff?
Another approach, rather than doing it company by company, is let the conference know what's acceptable and what's not. And for example, info security, read expositions, 3 years ago, banned inappropriate attire. They said, this is a business conference, show up to do business. And it's still valuable, as a vendor, it's still very valuable, but there's conference, but there's less distraction. And if we could get that message through UVM with Black Hat and RSA, and if you agree with those, make sure that when you say the Catwoman outfit's inappropriate and I don't want to buy from you because of it, you also let the conference organizers know, because we're the ones that are spending money. So maybe we just head it off. Like I said, Info Security did it, and I have been a huge fan of theirs for that. Of course, it could be that that's a largely female-led corporation. So.
No, but that's an excellent point. And, the way I think about it, so you all probably have like a daughter or a sister or a mother or some female person in your life, right? So would you take them with you? And if you wouldn't, why? Is it because it would be sort of embarrassing or uncomfortable? So just, that's what it's like for, for like me to go to a conference or whatever. Although I will say I have to throw this out there. The good thing about security conferences is that I never, ever have to wait in line for the bathroom, ever. Every other conference I always have to wait.
I think we were full of yesterday, though. It's a good sign from BSides.
Yeah, no, it is. And, I came to BSides, actually it was my first time last year, and I really didn't know anybody. I came with a buddy of mine, and I don't remember there being that many women here. And I did meet a few people because of the ladies' LunchCon meetup, which is a great idea. But I feel like this year it's a lot more diverse than it was last year. And I'm going to think that that's something to do with the organizers. And I'm also going to hopefully think that it's something to do with just how the industry is changing a little bit. And everybody that I talk to, one-on-one is so open to this discussion. So, it's not like a pointing a finger at anybody, but it does take a collective effort to make a difference. And like we're saying, tell the conference organizers that what's acceptable and what's not. So just on the whole topic of filling jobs, so everybody knows, I think, that there's a scarcity of technical people, right? There's companies that have tons of jobs open, they can't fill them. If you don't open your pool, and you were saying this, Matt, a little bit, open it to everybody, then how are you going to fill all those positions? So how can we think differently about filling jobs? Because I know a lot of people who are looking for jobs in this industry, and there seems to be a bit of a disconnect. How do we get people in seats and hands on keys doing things? Regardless of their gender or orientation or color or anything else. Any ideas or thoughts on that?
So Cisco came to us wanting to have us come out to one of their retreats to speak to their senior staff on how they could bring diversity into their hiring. It didn't happen, but they're aware of this issue. And what I was going to tell them, as what I tell every opportunity and talk that I do, is that let's look at the people side of things. And I'm sure Matt's going to have something to say, because there are some baselines and foundational things that you need to have to do a job, yes. But does this person have the aptitude to learn? Do they show the passion? Versus resume requirements check, cert check, we have a pool of women that cannot find jobs. I don't get it. There's such a demand and shortage of cybersecurity. What is going on here? Let's get these women hired. Take a chance, like Emily said. There's a gamble there, yes. Like anybody you hire, what's the problem? So that is my fight right now. Again, with the awareness, think differently about how we hire. This is the traditional way, you bring your resume, you fill the application, check. Let's think differently.
And I was going to add too is, from the federal side, you obviously, hopefully, you all have been tuned into the news, and Mark made light of it earlier, is that, things like marriage equality have kind of changed how things are. So one of the things is benefits. Companies can do to attract certain applicants is to offer the kind of stuff that you want if you're working there. If you're, a working mother and you're worried about, healthcare that will cover your children. If you're LGBT, you want inclusive healthcare. Right now, the Human Rights Council tracks in the Corporate Equality Index several categories of, if an organization has an inclusive employee policy, if they have healthcare that covers transition costs for transgender individuals, as well as same-sex spouse coverage. If you have policies and benefits that are addressing the community's need, tout that, because then you're gonna get matched up with the right people. I mean, I know I personally self-selected myself out of a couple jobs because I couldn't get benefits for my partner, let alone any other benefits. And I'm sure those companies are missing out on not only possibly me, but other people who are looking at the same perspective. So if you're an employer, kind of think of it that way, is trying to, that will connect you with some people too.
So one of the big things that we've talked about is changing the application process, right? I mean, it sucks to apply for jobs, but you have to, mainly because of federal requirements. You have OFCCP, if you haven't heard of that. This area is huge with that just because it's federal contractors. You have to check a bunch of boxes. The employer has to say we have a representative population, a representative pool of candidates based on the population that we're in. The employer has to track all that stuff, save it for 3 years. And we're talking about compliance issues here on the employer side, and it makes the application process terrible for the candidates, for people that want the jobs. They can't even fill out the application because it takes 45 minutes to check all these boxes to say things. So half the people are gone by the time they even get to an interview part, and we haven't even talked about the talent yet, how they're selected in the talent. It's usually a face-to-face interview. Changing the application process to do more skill-based functions, so coding test, do a pen test on something, show the skill set before you even show who that person is probably one of the best ways to do it, but not a lot of folks are doing that. A lot of technologies out there right now that companies can actually use to do that on the front end. I think Facebook does a lot of stuff with challenges. There's a lot of big companies that do that. But it's going to start getting better for smaller organizations. But there's one industry that a friend of mine named Kathleen Smith, she's huge in this area for veteran hiring and things like that. She gave me a great analogy of an industry that's actually improved their selection process in diversity issues, and that's the music industry. If anybody's ever played an instrument, selection for an orchestra or a symphony, they go into a room, they have their instrument, there's a curtain between them and the judges. All you do is hear what they're doing. You don't see them. You barely talk to them. It's about pure talent. And I think we get in the way of that with compliance, checking boxes, making sure we're doing everything right. You have to do everything right, but then there's no way to actually assess the talent of everybody that actually could be qualified for that job, because there's built-in barriers to just getting to that point.
I think that it's an interesting thing that we also, and I think it's also one of the pitfalls for information technology in general, and especially for a lot of the folks here that have been in federal frame, like the time into the disaster that I personally view as FISMA, where we also have these checkboxes, and you have them in the hiring process too. And a lot of organizations have that. Like, do you have a bachelor's in computer science? Check, yes or no. If you don't, boom, you're done. You're out. You're gone. Do you have a CISSP or a CISA? No? Boom, done, you're gone. And so we have the wrong checkboxes too, I think, as part of the challenge. Just as we have like checkboxes like when the first PCI DSS standard came out for credit card stuff. Do you have a firewall? Yes, check. It's sitting over in the corner of the box. We haven't even put it in the rack yet, but yes, we have a firewall, sure. Great, you have a compliance requirement that's absolutely worthless. If I were to actually try and get hired today in technology, unless the employer is willing to take experience of my 20+ years of doing this, I would not have a job because my degree is in German. It's not in IT. I never had a degree in anything related to computer science. It's all German. I can tell you stuff in Middle High German, and it has nothing to do with what I do today. It's my skills. And so long as we have the wrong checkboxes for those requirements too, we're still going to have issues. We need to somehow get to that, as Emily was saying, point where it's about taking that chance on that person who doesn't have all those checkboxes and letting them get far enough in the process. Because personally, I think, have any of you tried to use Taleo.net or any hiring process that's tried to use that site? It's a freaking disaster. Could some of you go work for them and fix that stuff? Because personally, I think if you make it all the way through to the end of one of those and successfully submit a resume, you should have the job immediately because their site's a freaking disaster. And as long as we have that kind of stuff, that's going to be one of our problems.
So real quick, I want to go back to what Matt was saying and share a story. But yes, like practical interviews, I think definitely you're showcasing what you know. Obviously, you know what you don't. So I had an intense interview, this is a while ago, like years ago, but intense interview, intense gig, and aced it, right? And a buddy of mine worked there, referred me in, so I didn't have to go through the application process and all that. It was known they do practicals. So I was like, yeah, go do my lab and get this job. So I get there and no practical. So I was like, okay, what's going on? Aren't I supposed to do a practical interview? Didn't happen, but I still got the job, but I didn't end up doing pen testing, did I? They hired me for something else and it was on my resume. So that's the other part. You know, great, you're doing practicals, but let's stick with that, you know what I mean? Across the board, so I just wanted to share that it was messed up.
Yes. So I think, and I think this is a gender thing, like if I don't really go to job fairs anymore, but I used to go to a lot of job fairs, and everybody that I talked to, every recruiter, not Matt. Yeah, job fairs are kind of lame. But everybody was like, oh, you should do pre-sales. Like, they didn't care what my background was or anything else. They just looked at me, I think, as a female who might be able to, like, talk to people or whatever, and they're like, pigeonholed me instantly, like, sales. And I am, like, the last person to be a salesperson. That's, like, not my thing at all. But I was really frustrated by that because I was like, why are people always pushing me towards that job when it's not at all who I am or what I want to do? So yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think that the hiring process is really broken. I refuse to apply to a federal job because USA Jobs is like the worst website, and we all have like that. We all have like that. I don't know what everybody else level is, but I have like a 2-second tolerance for like a bad website, right? USA Jobs, it's just no.
Well, but
So yeah.
So I brought up OFCCP not too long ago, and I'm not an expert in that. I don't always have to deal with it. You want an expert, there's a guy named Derek Zeller in recruiting at Durdiver on Twitter. He's the expert and will scare the hell out of you if you're on the hiring side by all the things you're probably doing wrong. But USA Jobs is a good example. Anything that's federal in this area, you have no idea what I as a recruiter would have to do to make sure that I'm compliant with that. Because otherwise I get an audit, just like you guys audit your companies, and if you're found out of compliance, you got fines and all sorts of stuff. It impacts the business. For career fair, so how many people here have tried to give their resume to a recruiter at a career fair only to hear them say, I can't take that? Happens all the time. You know why? Because at that point, if they take the resume, you're considered an applicant. Therefore, you have to be tracked and monitored, and all these assumptions made by you, which may or may not be accurate, you don't know. So they have to put you into that application. They have to make you go apply online so you can self-select your information, so you can be tracked, so you can be in that checkbox of we're compliant now. As a recruiter, if I'm doing sourcing, I have to track the search string that I use, if I'm looking at Monster or Dice or Google searches, anything like that, I have to take that string that I put it into a spreadsheet probably, say, okay, that result gave me 100 applicants. Out of that 100 applicants, how many did I call? Out of those people that I called, who did I talk to? Out of those that I talked to, who was diverse? Just based on a guess sometimes? That name sounds diverse, I'll just click that box. And then I have to track that and save it for 3 years. Now, those are all these OFCCP standards that just from talking to you, I would have to track all that stuff versus send you to an ATS where it'll do it for me.
At what size of company does all that stuff kick in? Because it doesn't really apply to tiny companies.
No, it applies to anybody that would do anything with the federal government. So your mom and pop, government contractor that works out of their basement or something, if they're hiring people and they're selecting people to work on federal contracts, they have to track that stuff all the way up through your big time, 100,000 people companies.
Just go ahead and copy some numbers for about 10 minutes left. So it might be a good idea to go to some questions in the audience.
Yes.
You mentioned some of the bad websites. What are some of the good ones?
Oh, for job stuff?
Yeah. I mean, I'm doing research on this topic that you guys just brought up here. I'm looking at the impact on cybersecurity professionals and some of the things that you brought up. I'm just curious what ones that you believe actually are doing right, because that's probably more beneficial for everybody in the room to avoid the bad.
So, I mean, for me, it's just anecdotal. I'm not an expert on hiring or anything like that. I personally like Indeed.com because it does an amazing spider crawl through everything, and you can really pare down. And actually, I had a slide in another presentation. I did a quick search in Indeed for cybersecurity, right? There were 15,000 jobs, and they categorized by salary as well. They're all 70,000 a year up, right? So, and again, that's the crazy disconnect. So there's all these jobs. We all know there's all these jobs, but yet we all know people who aren't able to get their foot in the door with these jobs. So.
But Indeed still dumps you into the application.
Yeah, they do. They do. I mean, basically, I'll find a job on Indeed and then go to that company's website to look at it rather than go through whatever thing. But yeah. All right. So.
Quick answer: there are none.
Yeah.
I'm sorry to say, there just aren't.
Yeah, there isn't a good answer. I mean, but I think, and I didn't really even expect the conversation to go this way, but the hiring process really is very broken, and we need to fix that. I get the sense, I mean, you're all here, right? So people are interested in making a difference, but it's just technically it's kind of hard to do it right now. I know there was a couple other hands.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so hi, this is an excellent discussion. I am actually a professor of information systems and cybersecurity at Howard University, so I see many of these areas of discussion that you're just talking about and the impact and the things that are wrong. And there is actually a lot being done, and I do research on STEM and cybersecurity. And I guess my question would be, we've spoken a lot about things that could be improved, and I think if we focus on if we could talk a little bit about what are some things that have worked, if we can have some sense of attributes of things that work, then we can say this is what we need to, this is how we can make things better, so we're to go for it. Because we can't, obviously all these issues that you've discussed, rightly so, they're long-term strategy things. We can't change the federal government website. That it's not in our realm of influence right now. So if we could just talk a little bit about things that you have seen, and this is what we talk a lot about in the classroom, and what I write on, I do research on this side. What works, and what timeline are we talking about for it?
Yeah, so that's a perfect comment, and I feel like we didn't really get to the making progress part, but we are making progress. What we do at Women's Society of CyberJutsu makes a big difference. We're getting women and girls involved in cybersecurity from a very technical standpoint. And it's, by the way, we are a nonprofit pending. We're always looking for sponsors, people to conduct workshops. So I'll just put that little shameless plug out there. But yeah, so I think what we're kind of lacking are the role models and the mentors and people who are in the field who you could look at and say, you know, this person is a successful, you know, whatever in cybersecurity.
But I guess my question is more on what does work and what impact has it made?
Right.
So you could say, we tried this conference and we were able to convert, we were able to have 5 young women choose this as a field. We've had, like I in my classroom, I've converted, let's say, 3 people to become IS cybersecurity majors every semester. So I guess my focus is more on, the question is, what has been done that you've seen that's actually said, this has changed the career path of 5 minorities or 2 women or et cetera?
Okay, so like actual metrics.
Yeah, well, so there's a couple things, right? I mean, so the solution has a long tail, right? You're talking about young women, maybe I have a 5-year-old, right? I'm having her do blocks and Legos, and, you know, I'm trying to get her, so that's a long, she's not gonna be in the workforce for another 15 years, right? So there's a long tail solution to that. The shorter tail solution I've seen, at least in some things that I've observed, is internal groups and associations, so just informal groups, women in technology, but just don't keep it to women in technology. You know, include everybody, so that way that message is shared. So small groups inside of the organization, which then begs the point of there's no role model, there's maybe no leader. So you have to find that one person that could actually step up and say, yeah, champion it, exactly, and be that person and help create a leader if one doesn't naturally exist. But informal groups inside of larger organizations have worked. Smaller organizations, it's tougher. And that's where some of the more exciting jobs and things like that can happen, is in smaller companies. There's a lot more opportunities. But it's a long tail solution that's going to take years to fix. There's not enough people in the short term to say that there's something you can really put as a concrete solution to it. But just the awareness, talking about it, getting an informal group together to really be that voice within the company for that type of conversation.
I was going to say too is the mentorship aspect, lead by doing. You know, for the visibility for LGBT folks is a big thing that kind of within that community is you know, knowing that the new federal CTO is a very out lesbian. The fact that I was probably one of the very first trans people to work at the White House as a civilian employee. You know, I have people in the community that are actually now reaching out and looking up to me at this point. And, you know, it's one of those cases is that sometimes you yourself have to take that chance to be that visible thing, and then be willing to turn back and look at the community and help people who are needing that. And that's what I've seen is just trying to be an inspiration, or, you know, if you're the first, as, you know, Barnaby Jack said yesterday during his history thing, that there was a lot of people at GCHQ that did stuff that they couldn't tell about it until, you know, somebody in the private sector worked it out for themselves. But, you know, it's, you know, looking for and connecting folks who are, you know, out and about and can be seen as role models, and making sure people are connecting.
I got a question, yes, over there, in the brown jacket.
Hold on, I got it.
Oh, sorry, all right.
So, first, thanks for doing what you're doing, for advocating on behalf of the groups that you advocate for, the places you can. I think that's great. We all need to do that. My daughter's 13 months old. I'm advocating on her behalf at home. She's already letting up to 80 words per minute. It's pretty badass. But I have to ask a question. Over the past hour or so, there's been a couple comments that I think ignore something. You know, look around the room instead of talk about statistics. Everybody in this room needs to, you know, talk to the vendors at the booths. I looked around the room a couple times, and I think there's more conference attendees at the Starbucks line upstairs than there are in this room. Certainly more than there were at 9 o'clock session yesterday or any other session yesterday. Maybe it's the size of the room that's skewing that, but I'd like to know what the panelists think about that particular observation.
So I think, as the organizer of this BSides, I think a couple of things. One, I think by having this panel, and also I took a fair amount of care when I wrote our principles statement that we have on our website. It drew from a bunch of things that were talked about at other BSides and such. That helped, I think, change the vibe of this BSides in particular, I think, where this does seem to be, in general, a more open and inclusive community as far as InfoSec cons go, compared to the whole of everything I've ever been to, whether it's RSA, DEF CON, and so on. At the same time, I was kind of wondering, like this whole time leading up to this, when we first decided to do this panel, how many people are going to show up on Sunday morning? And what kind of group are we really going to get? And I think for the size of the number of attendees we have here, which so far as last I checked was around 640 for this BSides, I think it's partly the size of the room. I am a little disappointed. I was hoping for a little bit more. I do know that a lot of people were having fun drinking last night, and so Sunday mornings are always a bit more of a challenge.
It's the middle of night.
Our Sunday morning panel last year was also a much smaller populace than the one in the keynote and such on Saturday. So I wasn't expecting the full house, but at the same time, I certainly would have liked that there had been more people here. So I'm kind of mixed, personally.
I thought last year we had less people, honestly, from memory, so I think we're doing a little better.
Yeah, I'm very happy with the turnout. I'm glad you all actually came to talk about this and hear about this. So.
This is where the public shaming comes in that we talked about.
We could also offer free breakfast, so.
I was going to bring parties, but the bar was closed upstairs. Anyway.
So a couple more questions, because we're gonna have to wrap up soon so that the Marriott can reset for the next sessions.
Yeah, we have one.
I apologize. Excuse me. Hi, I'm Buddy. So I apologize for the length of the question. I really wanted to set what I'm trying to say anyway. Different scenarios have different opportunities for being effective. I feel that sexualizing and subjectifying people benefits businesses, or it gives perception it benefits businesses and reaches certain demographics. And it's a tactic that people have used and they believe it works. I think because it's difficult to prove a negative. It may be nothing, but it may be something. Giving the appearance, like you said, shaming people, or like, shaming people because they're drawing a crowd for the wrong reasons. In a technical industry, like anything, like I wouldn't say anything, but like mechanics, IT, architects, or what have you, maybe on the other end of the spectrum, like modeling of men, they're very different. They have their what they're looking for. What are your thoughts on letting how certain businesses practices aren't appropriate? And a follow-up question is, what do you think is a good strategy on making IT businesses squash these practices that alienate people?
That's another question.
I mean, so,
Good question.
I guess what I'm trying to say is like,
How do you break up the good old boys club?
like at a con, you might say to a sales rep, I don't think this is working the right way. It's inappropriate, it makes me feel uncomfortable. But how many people here in the audience will go that extra mile and actually contact those vendors, whereas opposed at work, you can talk to people you feel is making uncomfortable, or the person who's making them uncomfortable, or go to a supervisor. There's tactics that I think people ignore because they don't want to be the bad guy.
Yeah, so we kind of touched on that a little bit. It's hard to be the trailblazer or the one who says this is not cool or this is not acceptable, but everybody has to, otherwise there won't be any change. One of my favorite quotes is, "Be the change that you wish to see in the world," Gandhi, and it's true. It's like if you want things to be different, then you need to do something. You can't just sit back and wait for somebody else to do it. So everybody here, just the fact that you're actually here in this room, and I'm actually pleasantly surprised by the number of people. I thought I was going to have like 10 people. So you're all here because obviously you're interested, you care about this, I'm assuming. So think about what you can do when you go back to your workplace to make a difference. And I don't know the answers, but there's lots of possibilities, right? And, we do have lots of ideas if you want to talk to us after.
I think everyone's thinking the other person's going to do it.
Yeah.
That's why nothing's getting done. So it's step up.
And that's what I meant in my position is like, I could have just cowered and said, I'm not going to be visible. And I said, screw it, I've got nothing to lose. I'm at the top of where I'm at right now, hanging out. And I think that's, a pretty good motto to say, if you're here, do something, be the change. So.
I'd just like to say too, and I know it's one more question, I just want to put in this plug. I really have to take my hat off to Marcel and Lisa for the work that we're doing in the community, because right now, in the foundational stages, the cybersecurity industry is still budding and still exploding, and the mark that they're making for women and for other minority diversity, I really take my hat off to you guys. You guys do a great job.
Thanks, Mark.
You really do. Their women's society, I started going to their workshops, but I'm a guy. So they made an associate membership where men could join. So I can go to like some of their stuff, but I'm just telling you, they really do a great job.
Yes, so thank you, Mark, for saying that. It's actually really funny. I've known Mark for a while, but we do some really cool technical workshops and whatnot, and Mark was always like, what? Where are you going? What you're doing? What kind of workshop? How come I can't go? So yeah, it's pretty cool, but we do try to be inclusive, so men can join as well. Anyway, so I think
we're going to need to leave it at this one last question, but I also encourage everybody to continue the discussion out in LobbyCon. By all means, we'll just do this one last question.
And we have a table upstairs too, if anybody wants to come in and talk to us.
Up in the junior ballroom level, we do have the Women's Society of CyberJutsu has a table, so feel free to take the discussion there as well. Your last question.
Yeah, good morning, my name is Sebastian. My experience has been, I know this market's kind of insulated in some of these terms, but I've seen in other locations, other markets where hiring managers will throw your resume into the garbage because of your name. Where people will come, they'll make it to the in-person interview, and they'll offer to work for free, and they'll be turned, for 6 months as an intern, and they have the skill set, and they'll be turned down because of their race. So to me, is it time to stop begging these large corporate entities and things, or other ones, to accommodate us when it's 2014 and this is still happening? I'm shocked. I lived overseas for 12 years working over other countries. I'm shocked when people's resumes get trashed with their name. And this is not an isolated thing. This has been corroborated by Harvard Business School. They've done research that shows that if your name is a certain name, it's going to take you maybe 8-12 weeks to get a job extra. If that's the scenario, how can we reasonably expect by just complaining that they're going to accommodate more women and minorities into this field? Is it time for us as InfoSec professionals to take this on and just drive it until we can, accomplish our objectives, getting more women and minorities in this industry?
Yes.
Short answer is yes.
So there's a lot of stories like that, right? There's a recent article I read where a guy, his name was Jose, he was applying for all sorts of jobs. He wasn't technical, but that doesn't really matter in this situation. He changed his name, dropped one letter out of his name, and got a job within a couple of weeks. He took the S out, and he was just Joe. And whether that really had anything to do with it or not, it probably did, to be honest with you. But hopefully there are enough people on the front end of that can kind of be that champion. I don't care about that stuff when I look at resumes. It doesn't matter to me. I've had people that were actually deaf. We haven't talked about people with disabilities, right? Mm-hmm. Somebody who was deaf. I did a phone screen with him, and he was using an interpreter. And the hiring manager never knew that was the case. We didn't get to that point. He did a coding assessment, didn't pass the coding assessment. I gave that person proper feedback, made sure he didn't, but the manager never knew that person had a disability and that we would have to have made an accommodation for that person if that was the right person. So hopefully there are enough people on the front end of that to protect the pureness of an application and candidate and skills. But you're right, it still happens. It's going to happen. I don't know how to stop it. Until people are forced out of those positions, accountability is made. it's a tough thing to change. It really is. And if you have a chance to make that impact and talk about be the change, do it. But it's hard to do because you put yourself out there.
Actually, we do have one solution. During my time at OMB over the summer, part of this initiative called Smarter IT was to focus on workforce and hiring. And I don't know if anybody's heard of US Digital Service. They're kind of like the crack squad of nerds and geeks to kind of come in and fix certain federal IT projects. But as part of their hiring, they actually do blind resume review. So there's a panel and they remove the names. And they hire on basically the skills, or at least they get through the first thing based on the skills they'd like to interview. It's been relatively successful. I have my own personal views on how the team's made up, but that process has definitely kind of been streamlined and it's at least being piloted. So looking at a blind choice thing works. Anecdotally, we have a little sidebar here. An interesting thing for, say, trans people is the loss of privilege. I used to get about a 90% hit rate from resume submissions to getting a job interview. Now it's the other way around. I get about 10%. So there's still internal biases, I think, on gender, but let alone, you've got the aspect of, okay, now I've got that 10% job interview, now I get a chance to go see somebody. And then the walk, as I mentioned earlier, that as you walk in the room, there's the visual biases that take hold as well. So it's not, there's one solution is, a way forward, but there's also still some other things in the more traditional that we have to overcome.
Okay, so I know we've totally gone over probably. I just wanted to thank the panel. You guys have been awesome, guys, gals. And thank you very much to the audience for coming. Totally appreciate you being here, 9 o'clock. Without a Bloody Mary. That's where I'm going next, I think. Anyway, thanks.